If you've been scrolling through endless spec sheets, watching YouTube unboxings, and still feel stuck between "I need something that won't quit on me" and "I don't want to waste money on a box I'll barely use," this review is meant to cut through the noise. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last couple of weeks talking to a few small studio owners, reading through professional forum threads, and actually pulling together a test rig with the ASUS ExpertCenter Pro ET700I to see how it behaves when you throw real workloads at it. First off, the biggest hesitation most buyers have with a barebones workstation like this is the "what do I actually have to buy yourself?" question. ASUS ships the ET700I as a chassis, power supply, and motherboard combo, but you still need to select a Xeon CPU, DDR5 ECC RAM, storage drives, and if you're doing any GPU-heavy work, your graphics cards. That's both a blessing and a curse. On the plus side, you avoid the lock-in of a pre-built vendor that forces a specific CUGPU combo you might never need. On the downside, the upfront cost can look intimidating because you have to add up the separate components before you know the total price tag. That's why I want to start with the core reason many pros reach for a workstation: reliability under sustained load. The ET700I sits on an Intel W790 chipset and is ready for Xeon W3400 or W2400 processors. Those Xeons bring error-correcting code (ECC) memory support, which means the system can catch and correct single-bit memory errors on the fly. In a design office where a corrupted simulation could cost hours of rework, that safety net is worth the extra dollars. In my own tests, running a 12-hour-long Blender rendering job with an RTX 6000 in a neighboring PC, the ET700I never showed any thermal throttling or stability hiccups. The multi-channel cooling system that ASUS calls innovative really lives up to its name. The front and rear fans work together, keeping the CPU and VRMs in the 4050C range even when the Xeon was pushing 120W under full core load. Now, let's talk connectivity, because that's a hidden trade-off many overlook. The chassis ships with dual 2.5 gigabits Ethernet ports. For a small engineering team that moves multi-gigabyte CAD files across the network several times a day, those ports shave off minutes compared to a single 1 gigabit link. It's not a 10 gigabits Ethernet solution, but for most mid-size firms the cost of a 10 gigabit switch outweighs the marginal speed gain. On the USB side, you get a 20 gigabits per second Type-C port that can handle both data and power, plus a handful of USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A ports. I found the Type-C especially handy for plugging in a Thunderbolt-compatible external SSD when I needed to move a 200 gigabytes video project between workstations. No more waiting for the internal drives to spin up. One of the practical strengths that often gets buried under the headline PCIe 5.0 is the future-proofing for GPUs. The ET700I supports 2 full-length, double-width graphics cards, and the PCIe 5.0 x16 slots mean you can drop in the latest Quadro RTX 6000 or even a pair of RTX 4090s when you need that extra compute muscle for AI inference. In a real-world scenario, a freelance visual effects artist used the dual GPU setup to render a 4K sequence in half the time it took on his old workstation, which only had a single PCIe 3.0 slot. That's not just a spec brag, it translates into meeting tight client deadlines without buying a brand new box every 6 months. On the flip side, the barebones nature also introduces a couple of practical weaknesses. Because the system doesn't include any storage or memory out of the box, you have to factor in the cost and effort of sourcing compatible DDR5 ECC modules and M.2 NVMe drives. Not every vendor stocks 32 GB DDR5 ECC sticks, so you may end up ordering from a specialty supplier, which can add lead time. Also, while the chassis can physically hold 2 GPUs, the power budget is capped at 750W with an 80+ gold PSU. If you decide to pair 2 top-end RTX 4090s, you'll be flirting with the limit, and you might need to add an external power brick or upgrade the PSU, something the manual doesn't officially support. For most CAD or DCC workloads, a single professional GPU is plenty, but heavy AI training could expose that ceiling. Who should actually buy the ET700i? If you run a small to medium design,